Are we ready to start? Can we please have everybody turn on their videos, especially the other laureates, because there was some message there that the laureates could please turn on your cameras and also rename from a Korean alphabet to your English to an English alphabet, so that we can recognize those of us who are here, please. Again, some of us have already turned on our cameras. Good evening to everybody. But I think there are some of us who have not yet turned on their video. And especially if you are among the laureates attending this NLG, it would be good if we could see you. And also if you could rename to your, from the Korean alphabet to an English alphabet, so that we can recognize the names, please. Secretariat, could you please help rename or some of the laureate participants? Do we have other participants other than those of us who are already here? So we have Mr. Basil Fernando, Mr. Sushil Pykurel, Mr. Lenin Raghuvanshi. But I think some of the other participants, especially from Sri Lanka, who are expected to be with us this afternoon, like Miss Ankana Nilapaajit, are you there, please? And if you could please open your video. Yeah, our participants from Sri Lanka. Could we please, yes, could we please turn on our video, please? If you could please turn on your video so that we can all see each other, please. So that we also know who are...
I'm here, Father Nandana.
Oh, yes, Father. But yes. I think the two additional ladies from Sri Lanka, Miss Ankana Nilapajit and Miss Danedenia Jayanti, who are expected to...
Ankana is from Thailand.
Oh, yes.
Only two from Sri Lanka. Jayanti is not available because we have electricity problems, and I don't think she will join.
Okay, thank you. But Ankana is with us. Is she? Miss Ankana?
She's from Thailand. She's from Thailand, not Sri Lanka.
Yeah, that's true. She's from Thailand. So Ankana, are you there? Is that you? Ankana, are you there? Secretariat, has Ankana joined us? Secretariat, please. No? Okay, I think since it's already 2 o'clock or past 2, I think we can probably start our meeting. I have been asked to moderate. So I am Joanna Carino from the Philippines, the 2019 laureate. So good afternoon to all of us here, fellow laureates, and to the May 18 Memorial Foundation, which acts as secretariat for this gathering of the network of laureates of the Gwangju Prize for Human Rights. And therefore, we would like to greet the laureates who are with us this afternoon. So we have presently co-chair of our network, Mr. Sushil Pykurel from Nepal. And we also have Mr. Basil Fernando from Sri Lanka. We have Mr. Lenin Raghuvanshi from India. And then we have Father Nandana Manatunga from Sri Lanka. And from the list that the Secretariat had provided me, and somebody else, can you please rename yourself? So from the list that the Secretariat had provided me, we are also expecting Mr. Thomas Mann from Malaysia. Is that you? So Mr. Thomas Mann,
Yes.
yeah, so he is here.
Yes,
Thank
I'm
you.
here.
Mr. Thomas Mann, Fan from Malaysia for the 2016 award. We are also expecting last year's awardee, Mr. Bejo, 2020, Untung from Indonesia. Bejo, are you here? Mr. Bejo, are you here? So the Secretariat provided me this list that said that Mr. Bejo Untung would also be with us. And then Miss Danedenia from Sri Lanka also, but Father said that he cannot be with us. She cannot be with us in relation to problems of connectivity. And of course, Mr. Basil from Sri Lanka. Okay. So I have been asked to moderate this afternoon session. Now, if you will remember, fellow laureates, we agreed to organize this network of laureates of the Gwangju Prize for Human Rights and Special Prize last year at the Gwangju Democracy Summit as our contribution to the continuing mission to defend and promote democracy and human rights wherever we are, and through solidarity actions in accordance with the spirit of the May 18 Democratic Uprising. If you will remember, this network of laureates also agreed to meet in General Assembly once a year in the form of the Gwangju Democracy Summit during the week of the Gwangju Democracy Forum, which is what this meeting this afternoon is for. It is unfortunate that there are only a few of us. I think there are only 8 of us in this virtual meeting this afternoon. Perhaps later we can discuss how to improve laureate participation in this network activities in the Gwangju Democracy Forum as a whole. The Gwangju Democracy Forum 2022 has the theme, An Answer to Global Crisis, Collaboration, and Solidarity. As NLG laureates, I am sure that wherever we are committed to the vision of building democratic societies where all human rights are fully protected, respected, and fulfilled. And if we find ourselves in countries where human rights and democracy are violated or under threat, we have to continue to be active human rights defenders and stand up for the poor, the deprived, and the oppressed. This afternoon's meeting of the Network of Laureates of the Gwangju Prize for Human Rights and Special Award will have a short presentation from Mr. Sushil Pykurel, our 2010 laureate from Nepal, on global democracy and human rights situation in COVID-19 and review of international organizations' COVID campaign. After Mr. Sushil's presentation, we will have an open discussion to be participated in by all of us laureates present here today. We can speak on the particular COVID-19 situations in our own countries, but I propose that we can also make recommendations on how to improve the workings of this network of laureates of the Gwangju Prize for Human Rights and the Special Prize. We are also supposed to make a draft of an open letter as a result of this meeting. I expect that the Secretariat has prepared a draft to start with. So I enjoin all of us to give our full attention and active participation to today's meeting of the network of Gwangju Prize of laureates of the Gwangju Prize for Human Rights and Special Awards. So without much ado, I would like to turn over to Sushil for his presentation. Thank you. Mr. Sushil.
Thank you very much. My namaste to each of you. And I am speaking from a country where there was thousands of people who had died because of the COVID. And I think we are also one of the worst victims because of, I would say, the lack of proper health system and healthcare system, which is needed for the people of the world. Let me start with that, a bit background, how COVID was, respond. When China, we come to know from the media that there was a virus in China detected. But when it was detected, we don't know. But when the media published it, there was two tendencies we saw. The one was that China was trying to hide, and in the name of exposing China, the Western countries, instead of becoming a developed country, becoming aware of that and taking responsibility on the global, we talk about the global democracy. So instead of that, what happened? That there was, the government started putting a lot of restriction on the people. And I have presented my writings in writing to the Secretariat. I hope everybody has gone through that, or if not, will be, the paper is already there. So I'm not going to read all of these because it is with us. But I would be very, like trying to finish within the given time. So how the COVID was taken, I think there was almost all the regimes, whether it is in the morning, I was listening, morning means in Nepal, it was morning, early morning, listening to the presentations from this, our event in Gwangju, where we're talking about this, how the regime, the type of regime in the world. I don't know that whether there is complete democracy or not, but still, we're talking about the flawed democracy. So the regime started, all the government started taking COVID as an opportune time to show their muscles first, show their power by putting restriction on the movement of the people, putting restriction on the democratic right of the people. That tendency we have seen, and the powerful country, instead of taking the responsibility, as the international instrument says, I don't think there is lack of international instrument and system. These are in place. What is UN? What is the World Health Organization? What is Labor Organization? And we have all the instrument, human rights instrument. We have compilation. If you look at the compilation of the human rights instrument, we have thick books are there, and everything is there. But keeping aside all of these, what we have seen, the government was trying to hide their incapabilities. Like I mentioned in the beginning, that even you will be surprised to know that the first victim, when we suspect that, the sample was sent to Hong Kong for PCR testing. Can you imagine our situation? So this was the situation of all the third world countries, the developing countries. Then what the developed countries were doing? United States, they imposed restriction. All the flights were canceled. The movement of the migrant worker, became the worst victim of that. There was complete lockdown at least in South Asia. India was complete lockdown, and a lot of our migrant workers were forced to come back to Nepal carrying COVID. So it was, I mentioned the word, we were the worst victim because, people were not, they were not treated as a human being. So ultra-nationalism was there, just to show that, we are able to treat our people, but we do not concern. And even China was going, US was going further and saying, blaming that, this is virus itself is a Chinese virus. The virus was identified as a Chinese, as a, like citizen of some country. So you can see the irresponsibility from the side of these all mighty countries. Then there comes that, the human rights situation. If you look at this human rights situation, not only the right of the freedom of speech was curtailed in many countries, almost, of course, it was a list in Nepal because we didn't suffer that. But in my neighboring country, the media were restricted. The social media was completely banned in many countries, and the regime, which were not democratic, they were taking it as an opportunity to suppress the people. Apart from that, the economic, social, and cultural rights, which we are very seldom talks about, it was curtailed like anything. The workers did not have, work to do. The factories were completely shut down. There was no economic activities, and people were dying for a vaccine when it was already started. China was vaccinating its people, United States was vaccinating its people, and the third world country and country like Nepal, even, and there is no any price tag on the vaccine. It depends upon the country which produced the vaccine. And even after paying high price for the vaccine, some countries say that, no, we cannot export the vaccine because we need it in our country. Look at the medicine was also, they put restriction on that. And we are one of the witness, we are the victim. We paid for AstraZeneca in India, but after first dose for elderly citizen, second dose was not available here. For months, for more than 6 months, we were waiting for that. And also the powerful country started, taking advantage of this, vaccine, the political advantage. And it became their, the foreign policy imperative like the thing, The country which were very much aligned to them, they were getting the vaccine. The country which was neutral or not aligned to them, not getting the vaccine. So you see that. And also the school, and especially the schools were closed for months and months, for a year. The children, in the name of, of course, they were saying that the virtual, education. Look at what is the situation of Sri Lanka now. Even our laureate is not able to come to us to talk to in the virtual meeting because there is lack of electricity. So same situation is in many countries. So how these people, the school children, they were deprived. The hospitals were closed. The hospitals were converted into COVID hospital. The privatization of all our health system, because of the World Bank and IMF, they always push the countries to go for privatization. Schools were privatized. So government school, children were not getting any education, whereas the private school, of course, the wealthy family goes there. The children from the wealthy family goes there. So these are the things, complete deprivation of the human right, taking advantage, I would say, from COVID. Some of the banks, all the economic financial sector, they were in loss. Economic sector, the production sector were in loss, but the banking sector is gaining. Why? We need to see how the COVID has exposed our bad management. So then, when we were talking about the human right, always we talk about it is a global responsibility. Why we create United Nations? Why we create World Health Organization, why we create labor organization, why we have the international instrument, who is accountable to implement that? We have seen that the most vulnerable institution in this world became the United Nations. The General Secretary was proposing many things, but there was no country to listen to that. Even WHO was, became victim of the political maneuvering and the ideological clash between China and the Western country. So they suffered a lot. You see that the COVID was identified in December 19, and only March it became pandemic. The World Health Organization declared pandemic, that it is a pandemic in only March. Within these 3 months, millions of people, hundreds of thousands of people were forced to go to the rest forever. So international instrument which we create, which the population of the world create for their safeguard, for their, take care. But even the COVAX, it is a system where we create it for the, equitable distribution of the vaccine and other medicine. But COVAX became, non-functioning. The COVAX facility, if you look at that, it was non-functioning almost for a year. So why it happened? Because UN system was not working. Because the countries, the country who had that capacity, they are taking as a vaccine nationalism was there. So in this context, as like a Bolivian minister was saying that the whole, he was saying that the developing country had faced many more, difficulties, greater adversity and limited resources during the pandemic. It was another situation, and the system had shown that profit comes before the people. That is the where we laureates and I think international community had to address this. Profit or human life. But mostly the people, the producers, the vaccine producers were very much looking for the producers, and it was used as a nationalist, slogan, like, we vaccinated our people, but not taking the care of the people other side of the border, and where we all, countries were victimized by this. Then I would just, say something about the, why it happened. We have a tendency, the powerful countries always, they feel that, the sanction works. And I think that not getting vaccine equally in countries like Africa and other, it is also one type of sanction is imposed there. Because if you not support, if you are not allied with any country, the powerful country, like African countries, some of the countries were getting very much support from China, the Chinese vaccine, and some of the pro-Western country were getting vaccine. But the countries like ours, third world countries and the non-aligned countries, they were not getting anything. So there was a psychological situation was created that you must ally with some country, some powerful country. That was the notion given, and still we are victim of that. So we need to see why it happened, because our international, we call the global democracy. But how we achieve the global democracy? If we don't have a system of accountability, if the World Health Organization is not able to perform its responsibility, if the International Labour Organization is not able to perform its responsibility, if the Office of the High Commission for Human Rights is not able to perform its responsibility, then who should be held accountable? I think we talk the human right, whenever we talk about human right, the international humanitarian law, the international human right law, what it says. We have a lot of, I have already mentioned that we have a lot of instruments, but no instrument were applied, and we have no any mechanism where we can hold accountable to those who violate the international humanitarian law, international human rights law. And the pandemic should be taken as an international issue. And there is the responsibility of the countries, the bigger countries, the powerful countries, the resourceful countries, and the international organization to take care of that, to respond to that. Pandemic is not a problem of one country, single country. It's an international pandemic. And if you restrict only by imposing restriction of the movement, only imposing the restriction of on the media, only restriction on the right to education and right to work, the countries were trying to address that COVID situation by putting a lot of restriction only. They didn't know how to do. They didn't know how to move, because the bigger country, which were producing the medicines, were enjoying with the money. Even I can give you instances. The Western countries, some of the European countries were dumping the vaccine. And we come to know that Denmark have a lot of AstraZeneca, which they are not allowing to vaccine their people, because they don't support that. I mean, they have some problem with the AstraZeneca. I don't know that. Then Nepal tried to get that AstraZeneca, which they were going to dump or throw, but we didn't get that. That means that we don't have a just full international system. We have institutions, but non-functioning institutions. So challenge is that, how we make them, how we make them operational, how we make them functioning according to their responsibility. We have seen the situation of Sri Lanka. Of course, Sri Lanka situation has reached in this situation because of mismanagement. We know that, authoritarian rule, whatnot. But apart from that, the handling of the COVID, the victim of the COVID also, it added them to reach in this situation. So when we talk about global democracy, the global democracy means democracy in each country. Democracy cannot function unless there is human right. And when you talk about human right, of course, human right is the responsibility of the international community. So we need to discuss, we need to talk about the accountability, held accountability. Unless we talk about the accountability in the international system, I think we all are victim of the COVID. The virus is there. So it has exposed our ability to rule. It has exposed our, the world, the worst victim. If you look at the death rate, the United States has the maximum death rate. Why? There is everything, but why didn't work? And the country like poor country, even they don't have statistics. They don't have data. Don't believe that in Asian country or South Asian country, it was managed. No, I can tell you no, because we don't have proper system of recording. We don't have data keeping. We don't have a health system in that in the situation to record everything. So in this situation, I think we have to think about the COVID has taught us a very important lesson, that is international cooperation on human rights, on health, on economic, social, and cultural rights. Unless there is not a accountability system, and we can hold accountable, and we have to make functional the UN bodies, the international instrument, and the international human rights bodies. They should not only record the instances of human rights, but they should go to the cause of the human rights violation. Why it is happening in many countries of the world. So with this, I think I would be grateful to listen to the other laureates, friends, and of course it will help me to again look into my own piece of paper, which I have already sent to our secretariat, and it is made available, I'm sure. So, of course, I will be adding, I will be listening to you all, and let us work together. And because we are from various countries, we work together for human rights. And human right is not only merely, like human right in a good situation, human right in the situation of pandemic, how we can protect the people, how we can strengthen the state. State became very vulnerable. Strengthening state is not that imposing restriction. Strengthening state is that their capacity to see to improve the health system, to improve the education system. And the worst victim in this COVID is the health and education and the livelihood of the people. With this, I thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sushil, for your presentation to us this afternoon. So as he that all people, wherever you are, whether in rich countries or poor, should enjoy the right to health. But unfortunately, under the international situation today, this is not so. And the rich countries, which is also where the vaccines were prepared, have had a monopoly, especially during the early days of the COVID pandemic. And they also wanted to vaccinate their own nationals first, and therefore many of the countries in the underdeveloped world or in the third world were actually in a very poor situation, lack of access not only to the vaccine but also the state of the health system and services in the poor countries. And therefore he says that actually this is a global concern, and therefore there should be solidarity and action also globally in relation to the basic health problem of the pandemic, which worsened the human rights situations in many countries, especially here in Asia. Now we would also like to welcome to this meeting the present laureate, the 2022 Gwangju Prize for Human Rights awardee. So she is here with us, Cynthia Maung, and she is the head of the Mai Tao Clinic. So welcome to this meeting, Miss Cynthia Maung. So can we open the discussion now to some of the comments? And I mean, if we have comments to make on the presentation of Mr. Sushil, and perhaps with reference also to the COVID situation in our countries. So can we invite the laureates to make your comments? Is there anyone who wants to make a comment? Just go ahead, please. Yes, Basil, please go ahead.
If nobody else is starting, I want to start. The Sushil made some important observations, but I would like to pose the question in a little different way. Not about what is wrong with the COVID or what is wrong with the government, but really what is wrong with us in terms of people involved in human rights. Why are we not capable of making the impact that we should? And why we remain so marginalized and an unimportant voice in when massive problems, COVID just being one, are happening. I think we have a different kind of disease, different to COVID. I think we have some mindset disease. this mindset belonged to some 30 years or 40 years back way of thinking in the human rights movement. And we have not changed. We are still going on the kind of mindset that was formed in the early period. And what is the difference between that early period and now, particularly for countries which we call the developing countries, which, except for South Korea, all others who are here are part of. Now, COVID being either badly managed situation which lead to death and many other things, were part of a bigger problem. Bigger problem is that of public services. Where public services fail, we must expect that tragedies will happen. It is through the development of public services that the system is created to protect human rights. And if these public services have not been developed in any country, or they have been allowed to, they have developed one time and has been allowed to die down, then people, when they have a crisis, when they have problems, they have nothing to resort to. And the human rights movement never developed approaches to deal with public institutions. We know if there is a torture victim, or if there is illegal detention, or even there are rights of women, domestic violence or other kinds of violence, something happens, individual cases or groups, we know to do some things, protest, go to a court, and things like that. But we do not know when the institutions go wrong. And all the institutions in our countries, in what are called the developing countries, have gone wrong. And that is why when you have problems, there are no solutions. It's no point talking about problems. This time there is COVID. Some years ago there was SARS. And in the future and before that, there were other problems, HIV/AIDS. And natural disasters will continue to come. This is out of our control. These are natural events, but that is not the issue. What is under our control are the public institutions through which we fight back. It is through the public institutions only we can fight back. Individuals can do a number of things, but we cannot fight back major issues. You have to fight back through institutions. Unless we know how to fight back against what is wrong with our institutions, then we will keep on repeating like that, and after some tragedy, we will come back once again and we will make speeches. So what are the institutionally, democracy functions through institutions. And where democratic institutions fail, then it is not democratic government. Whatever it is not a democratic government. And institutions that are failing among them are, first of all, the parliaments or representative bodies. And you go to, in a democratic sense, other institutions are the executive bodies and the judiciary. All these things have failed. they make people suffer much more than COVID. And it is a permanent factor of life. It is not only a certain time and you can take an injection and, for that. And then we feel that we take the first shot, second shot and third shot. And then we say, okay, at least to some extent we are immune. But when our institutions die, there is no such injections. We just suffer every day. And how do we suffer? In every possible way. For example, we suffer when our financial institutions fail us. And that is what we are experiencing in Sri Lanka at the moment. We are going through a period much worse than the COVID. COVID was not our major problem. It was a problem, certainly. That was not the major problem. The major problem was our financial institutions were mismanaged. Not mismanaged, robbed. They were robbed. Public. And just now in Philippines, we find Ferdinand Marcos's son has come back as the president. And what did the people fought against at the time? To get rid of Marcos. But Marcos died. Marcos' money that was stolen from the nation did not die. It was powerful enough to create another president. And it will go on. Sri Lanka is robbed. That is why we have a financial crisis, where we are being told that from yesterday, we entered a period called the hard default. Hard default in economic terms means that we are a non-credit-worthy country in the world. People will not give us loans anymore because we cannot pay back loans. Why was that? Is it because of our natural resources or the non-resilience of the people, non-hardworking of the people? No, none of that. People robbed. They took the state money and deliberately mismanaged so that we have come to that point, and the people for next 10 years are going to suffer much more than from COVID. At least for 10 years. If we come out after 10 years, we will be lucky. And what is this nation? This was called the hope of Asia. When many of your countries were still very backward, Sri Lanka was considered second only to Japan. And today we are hard default country. Who did that? It's not the individuals. Our institutions did that. Take the same thing when it comes to our justice institutions. The police is a thief institution. It is an institution that people don't trust at all. Torture, extrajudicial killings, bribery and corruption. That is what policing means in all of our countries, I think, with exception, once again, to places like South Korea, to some extent Hong Kong, very few places. In these places, the people, for human rights, we have to go to the people to make complaints and to get investigation. Which country can you tell me where you can honestly believe that a proper investigation will be done? How many countries can claim that if there is a serious violation of human rights, within a very short time, as time is required, that there will be a proper investigation and that our prosecutors will properly prosecute, and then our judiciary will properly adjudicate? I come from a country where we one time claimed that we had that, and that was partly true. Not fully, but partly true, but not today. Today, hated institutions are the police, prosecution department, and judiciary to some extent. Judiciary still sometimes maintain its capacity, but they are under political pressures. So we can go on to all institutions. All the institutions have failed, but we have not learned to fight against that. Human rights movement does not have no strategies to fight against that. But I'm also talking about hope in Sri Lanka. For the first time in our history, some other people have learned to fight. Not NGO people, not the leftists, not the trade unionists, but a younger generation of young adults, men and women. They have come forward and build movements which in Asia we have not seen in the recent times. One of the greatest movements is today on the streets, but completely peaceful. Completely peaceful. Don't take even a stone to their hands. Deliberately, very principally, on their own, not just by accident, completely peaceful. And and who breaks the peace? On the 9th, the Prime Minister of the country broke peace. He brought goon squads trying to attack the people who are peacefully demonstrating. He brought them all over the place, given them to drink, and just not him only. Number of ministers, number of members of parliament, number of higher-ups in his party.
Basil, I think thank you very much for your comments, but I mean, could we wrap it up,
My main
please?
message is this: unless we learn from these new movements and does not change our way of style of work, we will be outdated and our contribution will be very little, despite of any awards and other things. I have also got that award, but with all these awards and other things, it doesn't mean much to the movements and the suffering people of our countries.
Thank you very much, Basil, for your comments and also for giving us some update on what is happening in your country, Sri Lanka. But also, I think that your challenge about working on the public institutions, and however these public institutions are all really failures, as what you said, it is not that the human rights movements in our countries will get outdated. Because, I mean, we will continue with our human rights defense, but as you said, we will have to adapt and adjust to changing situations. And if you saw these new movements arising in your country today, we actually also see that in the Philippines, as witness the very big crowds, which turned out during this electoral practice in the Philippines. And he also made mention actually about the recent results in the elections in the Philippines, but more on that in another session tomorrow. So to continue, as our 2022 awardee for the Gwangju Prize for Human Rights is with us today, so she is joining us, may we give her the opportunity to introduce herself and also the work that she has been doing as head of the Maitao Clinic, and also how they have been facing the threat of COVID-19. So could we please call on Dr. Cynthia, our awardee, 22 awardee for the Gwangju Prize for Human Rights. You have our congratulations, Dr. Cynthia, and you may please go ahead with your introduction.
Can I just say a few words before that?
Is it, Bejo, is it something to do with the
No,
earlier discussion?
This is Nandana because now I don't think I will be able to stay for long because we will be having the power cut very soon because we have electricity only for a few hours in Sri Lanka. So I don't think I will be able to stay until this is over. So I just wanted to confirm what Mr. Basil already told us because we also believe that this new movement, from these new movements, especially of the youth, who also wants to see things going beyond the existing structures. So and we learn a lot from them. So all what he said already I endorse, and I just wanted to add and say that we have to also think going out of the structures for a new kind of a environment where we can protect human rights and democracy. That's all. But I'm sorry, I won't be able to stay for a long because because of the power cut, we don't have not only electricity but even the other internet connections goes away. So I will not be able to stay long. That's why I want to say these few words. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you then for making that comment and your contributions. You actually would like to agree with what Basil earlier told us in more detail about the new movements in Sri Lanka. So now to proceed, can we please call now on Dr. Cynthia to please introduce yourself and also tell us about your Mai Tao clinic.
Hello, everybody. I am Dr. Cynthia Ma. I come from Thailand-Myanmar border. I have been working with displaced and migrant population and ethnic people along the border over the past 30 years. I myself fled to Thailand during 1988 uprising, democracy uprising was cracked down by the military regime. Since that time, I have seen the atrocities of civil war, oppression, the political oppression and human rights violation committed by the state. So before 2021, so briefly explain about Moderator. So initially, Moderator established to provide care for internally displaced people and migrant workers who are undocumented in Thailand. So these people could not access health service from both Thailand and Myanmar government because of their legal documents or the international humanitarian assistance be obstructed or restricted by the Burmese military regime. Both people who are living internally displaced and people living in Thailand has been growing over the past 30 years. So until 2021, and as of 2021, the UN OCHA stated that there are almost 350,000 people internally displaced on the in the China border and India border, Bangladesh border, and in Thailand border. And 100,000 people are living along the Thai border sites, living in the refugee camp. These people are restricted movement and they can access healthcare through international NGO. But they very little access for the education for young people and other social activity and lack of job opportunity. So at the same time, there are increasing number of migrant workers who forced to come to Thailand because of the economic mismanagement and poverty. So children, women accompany and come into Thailand. So our clinic has been expanding and become comprehensive primary healthcare facility, including like maternal and child health program. We focus a lot on maternal and child health. And the children who were born in Thailand are not certified by the Thai. Initially, this is not certified by the Thai authority because of most of the Burmese people who women deliver in Thailand cannot access to Thai health facility, and whether they are not access health services because of lack of documentation. Anyway, the Thai government provide vaccine for these children through our facility, but our information and data never been reached to the higher level because the vaccine we receive or the people we provide care are undocumented. So during COVID in 2010, inside Myanmar, our health system has been very weak, and there is inequality and access to care or quality of care compared to the central area because most of the resources are highly allocated in the central. Most of the peripheral area and ethnic people are lack of resources like funding or back infrastructure, as well as they are also committed. They are also continue forced to flee from their home. So access by international community is very low. So both in Thailand and Myanmar side, people moving back and forth to access for healthcare services and education for their children, as well as to get some document for legal status, even they do not have enough support and information. So the civil society group and the migrant community or ethnic community is setting up the builder system. So we already, over the past 30 years, we have trained health workers. We build a system that can respond to the changing context. So during the COVID in Myanmar, the public and private sector work very closely together to prevent, control, and treat, even we have very limited resources. In Thailand as well, the network of the community organization, even though they are working in the difficult situation with security, under the security threats, they are continue educate and engage with the community. So the community engagement for prevention, control, and access treatment is very important, especially for during the displacement and marginalized people, because they are also hiding or under threats of arrest and deported. And in Myanmar, when the military seized the power or military coup in 2021, it made more difficult for health workers, and the health workers themselves opposed the military coup and continue joining the civil disobedience movement. And the health workers been arrested, and some of them, the health facility being attacked. So the health system already weak are getting more and more deteriorated, and many health workers also fleeing to the border. And now they join together with the existing health workforces. So even in the challenging time, the health workers, health professionals continue fighting for human rights and whatever resources available, forming the network of health professional association, and to make sure that the people engage with all the prevention and control activities. But vaccine available is still very low because the vaccine is supposed to come from the government. But as this group, the ethnic group who are fighting against the military and the people who fled to the border, they are under the security threats. So they can no longer access vaccine through Myanmar government, and try to negotiate with Gavi and UNICEF to deliver essential primary healthcare services and humanitarian assistance, as well as vaccine through the international NGOs or the third party. But until now, it hasn't been suspect yet. And at the same time, people who are living on the border in Thailand, since they are undocumented, they're afraid to go to the public health services, so cannot access vaccine, and the availability of the vaccine for migrant community is stay very low because of their legal documents or the mobility. So the community organization on the border has been working on different health problems over the past 30 years. So through the training of the health workers and forming the network of organization, we can do like a work together on the malaria elimination and malaria task force, forming malaria task force. And currently also on the border, the ethnic health workers and the health workers who fled to the border, forming like a national health committee to make sure that the COVID-19 need to be prevent, control, and the access to treatment through the network, and giving the technical support and advocate for humanitarian assistance. So what I would like to highlight today for Burma is even in the under the military coup, continue fighting under the military coup, the people are subjected to have human rights violation, as well as they are also the security threats for the health worker and humanitarian workers. It made more challenging for control of the disease, and the trust of the trust from the community to the military is broken, and the relationship between the ethnic health organization, this has been existing, health network has been getting interrupted, and the coordination mechanism is getting difficult. So under this under the state violence or obstruction of the humanitarian assistance, the trust of the community to the government has been deteriorated. So it is made more difficult for humanitarian workers to do effective control of vaccine. So people or the community and trying to access humanitarian assistance through cross-border collaboration. So until now, the cross-border network can do something on the local level and accessing some supply and getting vaccine from the local health facility, but in the higher level discussion is still needed. So today I would like to highlight about displaced migrant community as well as conflict-affected population can access to safe water, hygiene supply, and access to healthcare is still very crucial, even in the COVID-19 period. Such of the COVID, the frontline health workers are in the front of fighting against that, and the security or protection of these human rights defender and health workers are very important to make sure that the disease, the COVID-19 disease, as well as many other communicable disease can be controlled through the protection and promotion of rights for the vulnerable people, and then protection of the health workers.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Cynthia, for that presentation and for sharing with us the situation at the border, no, where displaced people from the conflict in Myanmar, and also because of the lack of legal documentation and everything, really have a difficult time in relation to having to access not only the vaccine under these very difficult circumstances, but even basic social services such as water, no, and even education. So all the more we see the point being raised by Sushil earlier about vaccine inequality, but it's difficult for developing countries such as ours but it is doubly difficult, no, in areas of conflict where you have displaced persons and refugees who have left their countries but live in refugee camps or borders, and now have the most difficult time in acquiring not only the vaccine but even basic social services. And that is why there is really the need for international solidarity, no? I mean, you have our solidarity, Dr. Cynthia, but really there is the need for wider international solidarity, so such that grave problems such as this on the ground can be raised for wider attention, hopefully. So other laureates, do you have other comments to make, recommendations? We can open, please go ahead. Yes, Thomas from Malaysia, please go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you. Good day to all the fellow laureates, Madam Moderator. Yeah, I think that COVID is something that none of us in our lifetime have experienced. I mean, it is a global phenomenon that hit us in the last 2 years. And I think we heard from Sushil the ugly truth about vaccine nationalism, how the wealthier countries use their wealth and position to prioritize themselves. Then we also heard about vaccine inequality within a country, whereby those who have and those who have not, there is an inequality, and also the inequality in distribution due to failure of government, either through incompetence or through crises like civil war, things like that, and displaced people. But I would like to also report about, from my country, Malaysia, the unfortunate situation in my country where the start of the pandemic in March 2020 also was the start of a political coup in my country, where a new government that was elected by the majority of people at the last election was displaced, overthrown by members of parliament who defected to the opposition to form a new government at the very start of the pandemic. And when the new government took hold, they used COVID. They used COVID as an excuse to suspend civil liberty with the lockdown, to hang on to power in the 22 from that time onward, because the new government had a very slim majority, and in order to hold on to power, they even suspended parliament and election through a declaration of emergency in the name of COVID. So in the name of COVID, we found that our country, the democracy has taken a few steps backward because of this authoritarian tendencies of the government. Now, the failure that we are facing, I just want to echo what I think Basil has brought up. It's really the failure of institutions. You know, our institutions have not come to a place where they are strong enough to hold whoever is in government accountable for their action. So a prime minister in my country can arbitrarily on his own just suspend parliament without any almost like way to challenge that or check that. And we went through these 2 years with a lot of changes, because the very same government, the person that usurped power and came to power, was himself overthrown after 17 months through party defection again. So we had, over the last 4 years, 3 prime ministers and 7 change of state government. We have 14 states, and 7 of those that changed the leadership or snap election due to all this in the midst of COVID. So as you can imagine, COVID on its own is a challenge to the survival of people, but then we have a government that was not focused on handling COVID, but staying in power and grabbing power. So I think what we want to learn from this in our country is that we want to push for stronger institutions. So the good thing with a weak government that we have in Malaysia right now is that they need they are open to reform because they need cooperation from the opposition to stay in power. So what they have done is they reached out to the opposition for a confidence and supply agreement to stay in power. So the opposition has managed to push through some of the reform, including anti-hopping law and parliamentary reform. And we hope that out of a very terrible situation that we are in, politically and also public health-wise, Malaysia hopefully can come out of this democratically in a stronger position because of some of the reform that is taking place. So that's all I want to report on Malaysia's situation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Thomas, for sharing with us about Malaysia's situation. So we are really learning a lot this afternoon, no, from the direct sharing of the laureates from the different countries that they come from. I see the hand of Lenin raised. Yes, Lenin, please go ahead.
Very briefly, because I'm on tour, so I just joined in tour. And most important thing, I endorse the whole point of the Sushil Pykurel and also Basil, because there is the biggest crisis in this fascist, especially in India, what we observe, the fascist government, actually corporate fascist government attack on the all institutions. What we created in the 70 years, everything in the crisis. So that is the new trend. And the second endorsement, especially for the Sushilji, India supplied a lot of vaccines to the developed countries, but not to our neighbors. That is also very funny. And you look the behavior, their responsibility mostly for the neighbor countries, but they are giving to the, especially the Nepal, which is very close to our culture and also close to our politics. But they provided to the developed countries in Europe and other part. And the third important thing, because in the second COVID, we face a lot of death, and there's a big conflict between India, government of India and the World Health Organization. So World Health Organization provided more data, and the government of India told, no, this is not the real data. But we observe, I also faced that time 12 days in the ICUs, and that time is no oxygen. So we also like India also, we have the lack of the oxygen that time. The issue of the institutions especially is very important, how to create a campaigns to make a vibrant, proactive institutions in our countries. So that is very important. But I want to give just brief point into this editions. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Lenin, for your intervention. Yes, please go ahead, Angkana. Please go ahead with what you want to say. I think you are muted. Please unmute your mic.
Okay. Okay. My name is Shuming and I'm from Laos. First, let me congratulate Dr. Cynthia Mount, who is the 2022 Gwangju laureate. I've been following your work for many, many years, and I really congratulate you and also admire you all these years of work you have been doing at the border, Thailand and Myanmar border, serving the refugees and the migrants and those who escaped from political violations. I want to just raise questions. I think Basil, Thomas, and everyone has commented on the failure of our institutions. The issue is that we have seen this failure over many, many years. There have been some attempts at reforms, maybe a new government comes in and then do a little bit of reform and then slide back again. The question is, we have really failed as people, as Basil say, we have ourselves to blame. But at the same time, I still don't have the answers. How can these institutions be made accountable to the people when they are not actually responsible or accountable to the people themselves, but as Basil has said, they set themselves up only to rob the country. So my big question is, do we see a way of how these institutions can be reformed? The second issue is also raised by what we see around COVID and now the conflict in Ukraine are like the elements to make the perfect storm for our unraveling political and also economic crisis around the world. We see in Sri Lanka, I can tell you in Laos, we are the next Sri Lanka, except that we are next door to China, and maybe China will not let a Sri Lanka happen at their doorstep. We have seen young people trying to do something, but in talking to the young people, none of the young people have any confidence in the institutions. You talk to them about whether they would like to enter politics? No. Would they like to do anything to help reform the institutions? And they will say they have no confidence in the institutions. So I think our generation, have failed, and we continue not to have answers for our younger generation. Maybe I'd like to just throw this out for some of the more, for the other laureates who may have some comments or suggestions. How do we actually change our institutions?
Thank you, Shumeng from Laos, for your comments. May I also be allowed to make some comments on what the other laureates have said before me? Yes, I am also in agreement with the rest of you that our public institutions have failed. And the problem is how to make these institutions accountable to the people. As Basil had already mentioned earlier, the Philippines has just undergone an elections just some days ago. And unbelievably, the son of the dictator that the Filipino people had ousted in 1986 has now returned to the presidential palace. He won by what the Commission on Elections said was a landslide victory. And this is actually unbelievable for many of us. But even the rest of the world has been asking, how can this happen? The Filipino people ousted the dictators through a peaceful people power revolution in 1986, and yet today you have allowed the family to come back and the son and namesake to become president. And precisely, this is because of the failure of the public institutions, no? I mean, education, for one, education on martial law and human rights that has not been institutionalized in the country, and education on the truth, because what is happening now, and I think we see this not only in the Philippines but all over the world, and I would like to raise this also for our consideration, the role that social media like Facebook, YouTube, and TikTok, no, has been playing in spreading false information, disinformation, and historical revisionism, which now insidiously influence the minds of people who are not sufficiently educated on the truth about our history, like what happened under martial law. Even Nobel Peace Prize winner Maria Ressa, the journalist from the Philippines, has spoken about this. She spoke about this when she received her prize. And she has called to account the social media giants like Facebook, YouTube, for actually allowing false information, disinformation, myths and lies to be spread on social media, which now so many, especially among the youth, they get confused by what actually happened in Philippine history. And therefore, this is actually a major factor also in the results of the Philippine elections. But also, as some of you have said, particularly during these last Philippine elections, there were so many young people involved, no? Hundreds of thousands of young people were involved. They came out into the streets, no? The political rallies were in the hundreds of thousands, believe it or not. And so many young people were involved. And while it is true that we, the older generation, may have failed in sufficiently, defending human rights, such that today there is a complete failure of the political institutions, I think there is hope, because we see now the youth in their thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, coming out and putting themselves on the line and saying that they have a stake in the country's future. And therefore, it is important, that we persevere in still trying to be part of all of this whole human rights and democratization movements, and that we are able to adjust to the times, I mean, Basil was saying that, we have not changed our mindset and everything. But on the contrary, I think we constantly have to change our mindset, have to study precisely what is new. Like now, we really have to study the role of social media so that we are able to also adapt our strategies to the changing times and try to see what we can do, but it's no longer up to our generation. It is really now up to the youth and what they can do to change the situation for the better. Let us not lose hope. There is still hope while the youth in their numbers are there coming out wanting to change the world for the better. Other laureates, do we still have other comments to make? Because as per the program which was provided by the Secretariat, at around this time, because this is just a 2-hour meeting, we should be wrapping up and making a draft resolution or a draft open letter or something, no, as a result of this meeting of the laureates. Now, also, while the presentation that was given to us by Sushil earlier today was on COVID-19, I think from the discussion, it is clear that while COVID-19 is really a big problem, which all of us face, there is a bigger problem. There is the bigger problem, and that is actually the state of the governments, the state of the public institutions and the governments that we find ourselves in our countries here in Asia. And because of the failure of these public institutions, the work for democratization, peace building, human rights defense is never ending, no? I mean, we still have to proceed. These countries may be calling themselves democratic countries. Actually, the Philippines says it is a democratic country because it just held its elections, but look at what the results of the elections were. So it is clear that while these countries claim to be democratic countries, the institutions which are supposed to make democracy work, no, like elections, parliament, the judiciary, human rights institutions, really have to be reformed. And precisely that is the question which has been raised. But how do we reform these public institutions? No, of course, one would be participating in, for instance, the elections, like even in so far as there are so many problems associated with it, no, and trying to reform. But also, I think since all of us who are here and who have been selected as laureates through the years actually come from people's organizations and civil society organizations. And I think that it is up to us to continue with our never-ending task of human rights defense, working for democracy and peace in our particular countries, and also providing solidarity to each other, no, as we face concrete problems in our specific countries. So if we are to prepare a draft resolution, a draft open letter from this session of the network of laureates of the Gwangju Prize for Human Rights, while COVID is a major problem that we face, I think from the discussions that we also really have to make mention of the problem which Basil raised at the start, but also the rest of us have talked to about the failure of these public institutions or the failure of these so-called democratic institutions, and therefore the task of democratization, human rights and peace building still has to continue. May I please now ask the Secretariat if you have prepared a draft for discussion of the open letter. So may I please ask the Secretariat to, if you have prepared a draft, because otherwise, that's probably what we should be discussing. Anybody from the Secretariat who can help us here? Do we have other comments to make, laureates, fellow laureates?
if I may just add very briefly,
Yes, please go on.
when you are talking about solution, I think one of the matter that we raised is how the human rights movement should learn ways to fight to improve the public institutions. The older this thing, we did not go into this area. For example, there are hardly any movements, say, using the example of Philippines. It was a great thing to see the people's power. But at that time itself, I predicted that the people's power had not been followed with the institutional changes. They got rid of a man, got rid of brought another person who expanded the freedoms to some extent, illegal arrest and illegal detentions and all that. But we did not go into the mechanism by which Marcos controlled that society. So that remained untouched. So the result is, it's like a tree, just lying dormant. With the new rain comes, it just come up. So how fighting to improve institution, we have to learn how to study institutions. Find out what is wrong with certain institutions. Say, for example, police. Now, in every crisis, it is the police that the politicians use to suppress. Why do they just happen like that? We have to study, and for that, as you mentioned, we have to go to history. What is the history of this institution? Same way when it comes to other institutions. We must make it a part of our job to get people who are qualified. There are a lot of people who are capable to write, to think, to educate others. But what is wrong with our various institutions? We select an institution, we study, we educate. So that when times comes for change, as it comes on and off. For example, now there you have this new President Bombom, but once again, space will come within few years. Sometimes it may not be few years. In Sri Lanka, 2 years back, over 2/3 majority people, one person was elected. Today, the entire nation on street asking him to go. Main slogan in the country is that president should resign. But 2 years back, he got 2/3 majority. The very people who elected him are demanding that he should go. So that is how these things change. But when the change in time comes, if you don't have ideas, if you only say this man should go, then once again, after some time, new people will also be rejected the same way. So if we educate people and we ourselves educated, then due to the new generation and tool, you demand these changes. But for that, we have to do a lot of hard groundwork. So if we can add this area, how to improve our methodologies of work so that we become much more efficient in demanding reforms of public institutions.
Yes, on that point, Basil, it is true that we continuously have to work for political reforms. Like in the Philippines, the Constitution has an anti-dynasty provision. And yet, Congress has never passed the implementing rules and regulations to ban dynasties. And this is because dynasties composed Congress, and they're practically all relatives in dynasty families. Also, the Philippine Constitution has a law on party list system where the marginalized and the underrepresented should be able to go through Congress through the party list, not through, elections where you have to spend all of this money. And at the start, particularly after the People Power revolt in 1986, by the marginalized and underrepresented were able to get to Congress. Unfortunately, through the years, especially because the anti-dynasty provision has not really been concretized nor implemented, political dynasties have also co-opted and taken over the party list system, no? And therefore, it is true that, I mean, among the campaigns that have to be launched will be political reforms such as against dynasties, no, to ban dynasties, because otherwise it will just be the oligarchs and the rich who will always be in power from one election to the next. And also, like in the Philippines, that was an important provision. The party list system, which is reserved, has a reserved 20% of Congress seats for the underrepresented and marginalized. But again, we have to fight against its being co-opted by the again, by the oligarchs and the political dynasties. So I am sure that in the different countries that we find ourselves in, we really do have to study what political reforms social movements can work towards. And that we try to pursue these political reforms, and also, of course, the task of continuing education, no? Especially now that there are so many young people, at least in my country, who are wanting to get involved, no, in changing government. May I now please ask the Secretariat whether or what your proposals are for resolution from this network meeting? Please, somebody from the Secretariat. Yes, please do go ahead. Yes, please do go ahead. Are you from the May 18 Foundation? Please turn on your video so we can see you. Yes, calling on the Secretariat, please. Yes, can we call on the Secretariat, please?
Perhaps, if I may, Madam Moderator.
Oh, yes, Thomas, please go on.
Yeah, we could propose that the Secretariat draft a statement based on the presentation and discussion that we had this afternoon, and then through the email sent to us to comment and finalize it.
Okay. So Mr. Thomas Fan from Malaysia has proposed, are you listening, that we request the Secretariat, which is the May 18th Memorial Foundation acting as the Secretariat for this network, to please draft synthesis of this meeting that you will circulate to the laureates who are here present for our comments before we release this to the public. Is that okay with the rest of you laureates, or do you have additional recommendations?
Oh, it is okay, I think.
Okay, Lenin, you want to speak?
No, it is okay from my side.
Okay, so you agree to this suggestion of Thomas. Shumeng, you want to say something? You have your hand up. Yes, Sushil. You wait, please. Shumeng, you are muted. So I see that you are speaking. Please go ahead, please, before Sushil.
Oh, sorry. No, no. As I was told that the Secretariat has already prepared some draft, and they will be now, today they will finalize. I was told like that, but I don't know, maybe I couldn't understand that. But what I think is that we must, suggest them that put something like we discuss not only the COVID situation and the impact on the global democracy, but the thing is that unless, as Basil is always raising this issue, this is not that, today only.
Yes, yes.
But the problem is that, as you also mentioned, like, that there's, in the name of judiciary reform, in Nepal, we are a bit different than India. We have a constitutional, council which appoint judges, but again, bringing in the new phrase brought in the judiciary, what we did that we gave few seats to bar association, thinking that, maybe there's, practice, practitioners, that like the advocates who practice in the bar. So if they also come to the, bench, it will bring reform. But the consequence is that, the bar itself is so politicized now. So we started saying that, okay, from Congress or from Democrats, if you have two seats, then from the communist, we must have one seat and one seat that. So based on the election, in the parliament, they get the seat. They have allocated seat in the judiciary also. So I think, reform, yes. Without, I was talking about this international institutions reform also, because the accountability is essential, I think. And also there's a, we have impunity. So we never address that impunity because of, again, the same thing is that, our institutions are very weak. So I think, for that, I would propose, so put something on this in our statement, but may I request that we laureates, had sometime another meeting, especially focusing on that, because, we need to hand over something to our coming generation, So I mean to say that, new laureates are also coming, So how we continue, of course, Basil is very senior and he is raising always this issue. So how we bring, what is our strategy to translate it into the action? So that's only. So if we can bit guide through the statement, and I would propose that, let's have another session, especially devoted on this issue of how to address what we are addressing. The weak institutions are the major, like even Lenin mentioned that. In India now, the judiciary, can you imagine the Supreme Court Chief Justice is retired and next day he became the member of the upper house of the parliament through nomination by the political party, by the establishment. So it is happening here also.
Yes, of course, I understand that. That's true. Okay, I have been messaged by the Secretariat that we have to wrap up this meeting, as I think there will be another meeting in this room. So just to wrap up. So first, we had that discussion on Sushil's paper on the COVID-19. But when we went into this discussion, all of the other laureates were of the position that it is true, COVID-19 is a common problem, but the bigger problem is actually that our democratic institutions have failed. And therefore, our governments, while they purport to be democracies, are actually, the democratization movement has to be continued. And therefore, now, the challenge is what steps can be taken precisely to reform these political institutions which have, or supposedly democratic institutions, but which have failed us. So the problem is how to reform this. Now, of course, that is really a much bigger issue. So now Sushil is actually recommending that, in fact, we should have another meeting precisely on that, because we cannot proceed with other discussions on that. But also, can we now agree on the proposal of Thomas earlier that we have had this discussion of the laureates this afternoon? Secretariat, please, can we please now, I think that you have been recording the meeting. Can we please request the Secretariat to try and synthesize the discussions that we had this afternoon, and to write this up and to send it to each of us on email so that we can make our comments before we make it public. But also, may I enjoin all of the other laureates that if you want to make, even if just a short paragraph or sentence, or no, paragraph or two to be added to the results of this laureate meeting, then please do so, especially probably a summary situation of the countries that we are in, that the Secretariat can also try to include in the synthesis that they make. So with that, as they want us to wrap up the session, may I thank all of you, fellow laureates, for coming to attend our meeting of this network of laureates of the Gwangju Prize for Human Rights and Special Awards. Now, we will propose that we have another meeting. So from here, we will write the Secretariat and we will make proposals to them about how we want, because also I wanted that we could also have additional discussions on how to involve more of the other laureates, because as you see, we are only a few here, a handful, whereas there already are 32 awardees of the Gwangju Prize for Human Rights and Special Awards. So hopefully, we can still try also to involve the other laureates in other succeeding activities. Okay, so with that, I think we can now close our meeting, and I would like to thank all of you in the name of the May 18 Memorial Foundation. Thank all of us here this afternoon for attending this network meeting. Maraming salamat. Good day to all.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good day, everyone.
Yes, have a good day, everyone.